Arianna, I'm going to go over a couple things to show you, first of all, where to find your grades. And you probably know this already, but over here on the left side of Blackboard is something called My Grades. And if I click on that, this is what my screen looks like. And what you're going to see on your screen is grades for things that you've already submitted. And I'm going to see if I can find this annotated bibliography here. Right here, post your annotated bibliography. What you're going to see is a score over here. And if you click on that, if you click on the score or over here, it's going to take you to the page where you can see what I've commented on. And normally you're going to see, if I've commented on anything, you're going to see a little comment bubble over here, and you can click on that, and that will show you comments. Over here, if I've done a rubric, you'll see rubric, and that will take you to the rubric. The rubrics aren't that informative. You're going to get more by looking at the actual grading thing. So try clicking here and see if that takes you to the page. Try clicking here if that see if that takes you to the page, and then we'll take a look at what you have. And I would suggest too that anytime that you see comments or a rubric, like here it says view rubric, that you click on those things, because sometimes I put comments at the end of the rubrics. So look at both the rubrics and the comments. And you may see some stuff from previous assignments too, where I've talked about fragments. So that's how you get there. Now, once you've done that, this is what you're going to see. And this is I see that you submitted your annotated bibliography again. So good for you to do that revision. And this first paragraph that you have here is good. It's all complete sentences. And now we will look at the second one, and I'm going to see if I can make this a little bigger, so that might be helpful. Okay, here we go. All right, and I'm just going to start reading here. This article goes over important differences between being shy and an anxiety disorder. A complete sentence has a subject, which is the actor, and in this case it's this article, and then it has what's called a predicate, and a predicate has a verb. It's got the action in it. So a complete sentence has an actor, an action, and a complete thought. So in this case, the article is the subject, goes over, that's the action. And then if we read this whole thing, it shows that we have a complete thought. Now, if we go to the next sentence, though, and I just read this, explaining how you should not believe that someone's illness is only shyness, but instead a greater problem. So as a reader, I'm looking at that and I'm asking, who did the explaining? There's no subject here. Anytime you have an ing word, make sure that you've got a subject. So I could fix this by saying, the article explains how you should not believe that someone's illness is only shyness, but instead a greater problem. And then if we look at the next sentence here, again, we've got the same problem. Telling the people who believe it is simply shyness that they need to accept that anxiety exists instead of immediately saying they're only shy. So again, who's telling? So you could say something like, the article goes on to say that. And then here, saying the differences between shyness and an anxiety disorder are widely ignored by those without the disorder. In this case, you could fix it, I think, by just getting rid of saying that. And the differences between shyness and an anxiety disorder are widely ignored by those without the disorder. So in that case, if we got rid of this saying that, the differences then becomes the subject. The differences between shyness and an anxiety disorder, and then the verb is are widely ignored by those with the disorder. So one thing to watch for is when you start a sentence with an ing word, that should alert you to the fact that, maybe I'm missing something there. So let's look at the next thing here. In this article, Mark Roth goes over the more mental side of the social anxiety disorder, talking about how it might work and how it feels to experience it. So Mark Roth is the subject, and Mark Roth goes over, and that's the verb, and then the rest of the sentence is just added information. So that's a complete sentence. Now let's look at the next sentence. As well as when it's more likely to develop in someone. If we just took that out of this paragraph and if I turned to you and said, as well as when it's more likely to develop in someone, you'd say, what? What are you talking about? Because what this is this is an added information fragment. And one way to fix this would be to just attach it to the previous sentence, and then it makes sense. So you could use a comma after it and then add as well as. So if I read that as a complete sentence, this is what it would sound like. In this article, Mark Roth goes over the more mental side of the social anxiety disorder, talking about how it might work and how it feels to experience it, comma, as well as when it's more likely to develop in someone. Now let's look at the third annotation here. If I start right here, going over their symptoms and how they are caused. So if I turned to you and said, going over their symptoms and how they are caused, you would again say, what? And I would say, the article goes over symptoms and how they are caused. And then you'd say, oh, I understand. You're talking about an article. And then next sentence, talking about how certain situations that teens and adults are put into can cause anxiety to arise. Then going over why it's important to try and avoid these situations so you can try to live mental illness free. So again, it's starting with that ing word, and we don't know who's going over their symptoms. So you could start this sentence by saying something like, the article also reviews symptoms and how they're caused. It talks about how certain situations that teens and adults are put into can cause anxiety to arise. And then it goes over why it's important to try and avoid these situations. And then if we go to the next sentence I've got highlighted here, saying to try to avoid situations that cause the illness, but some people cannot escape their situations easily. And again, if I turned to you and said, saying to try to avoid situations that can cause illness, but some people cannot escape their situations easily, again, you'd scratch your head. And then I would need to say, the article says that there are certain situations that should be avoided because they can cause illness. But even then, some people can't escape their situations easily. So I think you get the general idea there. And my recommendation for finding fragments, and I think most people have to do this, is to read your work out loud and backwards. And the reason I say backwards is because if you read, sometimes your fragments are like just added information. So if you read the first sentence, and then you read the second sentence makes perfect sense because you still have that first sentence in your mind. But when you read backwards out loud, then you have to see that each sentence stands alone. So if I were reading this particular passage backwards, this is what I would do. I believe that should also be addressed. Okay, that's a complete sentence. Saying to try to avoid situations that can cause illness, but some people cannot escape their situations easily. No, that doesn't make complete sense as a complete sentence. And then I'd read the next line, again going backwards. While this article is very informative and goes into detail, some of the things they say are a bit unrealistic. So, complete sentence. And let's look at this one. It then goes over what happens inside the brain of someone with the illness. That's a complete thought. Talking about how certain situations that teens and adults are put into can cause anxiety to arise, then going over why it's important to try and avoid these situations so you can try to live mental illness free. Again, I'm going to ask, who is talking? So those are the kinds of things to address. And I would give this assignment one more shot. I appreciate you doing it again for the second time. Because if we look at the, well, I'm not going to belabor this video. So anyway, that's just my thoughts. And I hope that's helpful.